had to wait for the tripod to stop wobbling because I kicked it because I'm a professional. Alright. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of Meredith Makes. I can't actually remember what number we're on. I think it's 8. It's been a while. Maybe it's 8. I think it's 8. If it's not, I'll put it on the screen. If you are new here, hi, welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. And if you're returning, hi, it's nice to see you again. I'm sorry, it's been a while. But yeah, I mean, no apologies really needed. When I first started this, I was pretty intentional from the beginning not to give myself like an upload schedule or be too committed to having to do it like every week or every 2 weeks, because I knew at some point life was going to happen on occasion, and it did, and that's fine. Nothing terrible was happening. I was just very busy, and I didn't have the right headspace to sit down and film, and also we had a period of really terrible weather, which meant it was quite hard for me to get decent lighting even during the daylight. So I was like, you know what, we're just gonna wait. And the cool thing about that is I've got quite a lot of, well, not loads, but like quite a lot of things to show you and talk about today, which is really fun. I just wanted to be kind of clear from the beginning. I'm not ever going to be a maker who won't film if I don't have a finished object to talk about or something like that, because I think a big part of what I'm trying to do is normalise the fact that we don't have to knit fast or be really prolific knitters in order to be knitters and to be valid in our craft and whatever it means to us. So I do have a few finished objects, not loads, but I have a few to show you and some whips to talk about and some other bits to talk about at the end. So if you're new here, should introduce myself. Hi, I'm Mary. I am a fibre artist and aspiring knitwear designer coming to you from Bristol in the UK. I have been podcasting since the beginning of this year, that's 2022, partly as a bit of an experiment and as a way to push myself out of my comfort zone a little bit, and also to, shed some light on a few things within the knitting community and see if I can be a useful and kind of positive voice within the community, because it's given me an awful lot over my lifetime, but particularly the last few years, and I'd like to give something back. So that's why I'm here. Hi, nice to meet you. Cool, so the way that my podcast is structured, if you haven't seen any already, they're pretty straightforward. I'll talk about some finished objects, I'll talk about some whips, I might talk about acquisitions, although that's not a kind of standard segment because I don't purchase yarn very often, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But if I have acquisitions or anything amazing to talk about from the world of indie dyers or cool new fibre discoveries, I'll talk about that. And then I have a chatter segment at the end where I'll talk about anything and everything, but usually it's interesting things that have come up in the fibre community that I am a part of recently. And I'm very conscious that particularly in the online space, not everybody's fibre community looks the same. And that's totally fine, but I have some stuff to talk about on that front today. So, first of all, let's talk about finished objects, shall we? So, for those of you who have been here for a while, I'm wearing knitwear, guys. I know! So, I don't have a ton of finished garments because up until very recently, I was very much what we would call a process knitter. So I knitted for the act of knitting, mainly because of what it did for my mental health, and because I hadn't really started to understand what my kind of style was, what yarns I like to work with, what kind of shapes and patterns, and I wasn't very confident, particularly in garment knitting. So I made a lot of socks. I still make a lot of socks. There are going to be some later. I made a lot of socks and kind of accessories and stuff, but I hadn't really expanded into a lot of garment knitting. And although I had done some, I'd actually gifted about 95% of anything I ever made up until I started the podcast. I had gifted away. So I don't have a lot of garments, but that is all changing because now I'm starting to make some. And this is a finished garment. I know. So I'm going to stand up and show you, but this is the Colour Galdana top by Heather and Hops, Cap, who I talk about basically every episode. Like, spoiler, it's just because she's great, and you should go check out her podcast. But this is a modified Colour Galdana top. It's really, really pretty. I love this colour. I'll turn around as well so you can see the back. I have no idea if that's in shot. My apologies if it's not. But it's got a really lovely construction. So I started this quite a long time ago, actually. I talked about it briefly on the last episode where I said I'm really excited about it because it's a great shape to show off my tattoos, which it definitely is, so that's nice. That's a win. But I started it just because Kat had made this beautiful new pattern. I really loved it and I wanted to make it. So at the time, I hadn't really experienced a lot of different kinds of yarn. I didn't and still don't have a massive budget for yarn and for my knitting craft, so I had some fingering weight sock yarn that I really, really liked, and it was a solid colour, and at the time I wasn't really making a lot of solid colour or tonal socks. I was using a lot of variegated and kind of funky yarns for socks. So I decided, you know what, I'm going to use this commercial sock yarn to make this top out of. And the yarn I used is, and I can never say it properly, Shapia, I think. Not sure. I'll put it on the screen. It is the Metropolis yarn in the colourway Milan or Milano. I'm not sure if they use the O on the end. It's this really beautiful burgundy colour. I really, really love it as a colour. Unfortunately, it has got some nylon in it, which is not the comfiest. I'm fine with it. I'm not like I've spoken about it before. I'm not sensitive to really woolly wools that people would consider to be itchy. I have no sensitivity to wool whatsoever, but interestingly, I do seem to have some sensitivity to nylon. I've had a mohair with nylon in it before, and I literally couldn't wear it because it just was so scratchy to me. So I'm fine with it. I really love it. I think I'm probably going to make another one, but I think I'm going to make it in a different yarn, and that's nothing to do with the pattern. That's just my yarn choice and not knowing my preferences at the time, and I still really love it, and I'm still definitely going to wear it. I suspect that this version may become actually something I layer over the top of long sleeves or t-shirts in the winter time, which is totally fine, and I'm still going to love it, and I still do love it. I think it's beautiful. I made a pretty good size for myself, actually. It's slightly too big, and that's good. I didn't want it to be really, really close fitting, so it's got like a decent amount. I think it's probably got like maybe 4 inches, 5 inches of positive ease. And I did include one of the pattern. So the way that it works, I'm not going to talk too much about the construction of it, but once you get into knitting in the round for the body, because it's top down, you have these really pretty knit and purl textures. And there is supposed to be like a lattice work one underneath here, but I decided, partly because I wanted it to be a little bit more simple, and I really liked where this was hitting me, so I didn't want to kind of continue it a lot further down, so I decided to do stockinette at the end, and then instead of what the pattern calls for, I did a little mock cable rib bind off, just so that it would lie nice and flat at the bottom, and it's worked out beautifully. I really, really love it. It's a beautiful pattern. Can't recommend the pattern enough. It's really lovely. Kat puts a lot of time and energy into the way that she writes her patterns, which I have a lot of time for, and I know that for some people they prefer pattern writing to be very mechanical and do this, then this, then this, and some people really like a little bit of chat and context, and Kat's patterns are really, really great to have a bit of both, which I like. So yeah, that's the Colour Galdana top, knitted in Shapia. So the next finished object, and this is going to be the last time I talk about this set of socks. So there's one up there on the blocker, here you go, behind me, and then I have one here as well. So I've been talking about nervous fibre yarns for a long time on this podcast. I love them, I think they're beautiful, and I knitted some samples for the lovely Charlotte of nervous fibre. So I'm not going to talk about these loads, I've talked about them before on the podcast, but if you're interested you can go back and have a look at them. These are the Vor socks by Fibertales, by Leaka of Fibertales, and they are beautiful. This is the Deepwood colourway, which is probably my favourite colour ever, I think. It's grey-green. It's just stunning. I love it so much. And then this contrast colour is called Buttered, which I've also made a lot of things out of. This is the Dreaming in Paris by Hoki Locatelli, which again I've had in my queue for a really long time, so I decided to do a little sample out of that. So it's actually striped. It's probably going to be quite tricky to see. Striped between the deep wood and buttered colour here. This is just deep wood on the heel, just buttered on the toe, and then there's a lacework panel of buttered and then deep wood at the top. So this is really beautiful, and I'm definitely going to make another pair of these because they were super fun to knit up. And I'm also going to make some voile socks for myself as well because they're stunning. So I made those, and then I had one more pair that I was going to make, and I asked Charlotte if she had a particular pattern that she'd like me to do, and she said no, just do one of yours or one that you like, not a problem, whatever. So I was having a play around, and I didn't quite have enough left. The good thing about knitting small socks, having small feet and knitting small socks, is you can usually get quite a lot of pairs out of 100 grams, especially if you're doing kind of multicoloured. So I had enough to make a pair of shorty socks. But instead of using one of my existing designs, so again, if you're new, I have 2 sock patterns out in the world right now. There'll be links to those things in the show notes below. But instead of doing one of my existing patterns, I was playing around with this idea of making like a mesh sock. But I wanted it to be kind of sturdy and not be too mesh. So I had a look at some of my stitch dictionaries and played around with some options, and this is what I came up with. It doesn't have a name, it's just a little recipe, and yeah, it looks like this. So this is knit out of the buttered colourway. It's a really simple construction. It is cuff down, but it could be knit toe up, it doesn't really make any difference. It is a shadow wrap heel. Go and check out Earth Tones Girl if you haven't seen the shadow wrap heel before. They're really lovely. If you like short row heel constructions, but you're not a big fan of German short rows, I can really recommend the shadow wrap. It's a great heel. Yeah, so I really like these. I think they've turned out really well. It's a very simple sock recipe. Now, what I decided to do with these was to put the sock recipe on my Patreon. So for those of you who don't know, I have a Patreon now. It was requested, so I thought I'll set one up. If you'd like to go and support me over there, you can. It just really helps to invest in making particularly my patterns as good as they can be. So tech editing, professional grading, all of those things, they do take investment, and unfortunately at the moment selling patterns doesn't make me any money, which is totally fine, and that's not why I'm doing it, but I do need to make sure that I'm not losing money by doing it as well. So basically it's just a way to help me invest into making sure patterns are really great, so that then I know I've got the resources to make them, to edit them properly, make them as inclusive and accessible as they can be, without losing money, and therefore not being able to do it anymore. At some point it may also go into investing into equipment and stuff for the YouTube channel, but for now I'm pretty set up there. I've got my little microphone, which I know is a bit ugly but does work, so yeah, for now I'm not going to do any more investment on the YouTube side, but yeah, I have a Patreon. Feel free to go and check it out. I also have a Ko-Fi page if you want to make a one-off donation. That's totally fine. Yeah, so little plug done. But I decided to put the recipe for these up for my patrons. So if you are any tier of subscription on Patreon, even the £1 a month early bird sock club, so the sock group, basically it's £1 a month, and all it means is you get first dibs on tester patterns and calls for any testers for my new sock patterns. So you'll find out about them a little bit earlier and get some behind the scenes as to how I design that kind of thing. So yes, that is available on my Patreon if you're interested in finding out the recipe for it. So I have one more finished object to talk about. This one's awesome. I'm really, really excited about this one. So I mentioned on my Instagram that I was going to be testing the Nurture bralette by Celine Knits. I saw the bralette and it popped up on my feed and I was like, wow, that's beautiful. It's much more of a kind of bra looking bralette, which I was really intrigued by. And it had a bunch of construction things that were relatively new to me, or just things I hadn't done very much. So I was really intrigued by it. And I mentioned on my Instagram I was going to do it, and then one of my lovely subscribers slash patrons slash someone who's done testing for me, who's asked not to be named, so I'm not going to name them, but I'm going to thank you anyway because it was so generous of you to send me a skein. So they very kindly donated the money for me to purchase a particular skein. They asked if I would buy something from Stranded Dye Works, not knowing that I love Stranded Dye Works, and I've bought lots of Jude's yarn before, so I was like, absolutely fine, not a problem, happy to do that. So what I decided to get was merino singles, because I've not worked with merino singles before, and I know that they're kind of softness-wise great for next to skin. So I decided to buy a skein of that, and I bought a colourway which I've been wanting to try out for a long time. So this is the yarn. It's showing up probably a little bit more purple in real life. It's a bit less purple than that, but that's probably closer. So this is the Shiner colourway. So it's like a purpley grey, very muted. It's not like lilac, and it's not in your face. It's a really beautiful colour, and on the skin it's quite neutral, which I really like. And I managed to knit this with exactly 50 grams of yarn, and I measured and counted my yardage of the skein before I started, and there was a little bit more than 100 grams. I think it was like 110 grams of yarn that I actually got in the skein. So I've got exactly 50 left, which means I used very slightly more than 50 to make this, which is great. So I know I've got like a solid amount of this left to do something else with. Possibly not another whole bralette, but something pretty sizable can be made out of that. And it's going to look a bit weird because it doesn't have a person in it, but here it is. Look at these funny little cups. So it's literally just come off the blocking mats. There you go. So this is the Nurture bralette. It's really hard to show you, but there you go. So it's got some really pretty lace at the bottom. The construction's really interesting, but the thing I'm massively impressed with about this is the pattern and the flexibility. So when I applied to do this test knit, Celine was like, right, which size would you like to do? And then she asks you to provide a couple of specific measurements, because what she does, and this is the kind of inclusivity that I love, she's not just size inclusive, she's also shape inclusive. So she specifically asked everybody to measure the curve, and for her, curve means from your underbust to the apex, basically to the biggest part of your boobs. And for everybody that's different. So even if you're knitting a specific size as far as final bust measurement is concerned, you might have more or less curve underneath and need more or less fabric from the kind of biggest point of the bra to back, basically reducing back down for your chest measurement. And she gives really fantastic instructions in the pattern as to how to do that. She gives you charts and tables to work out exactly how many short rows you need to do, and gives you a little box to fill in specific bits as you go through, so you're not constantly like flipping around, which is amazing. The pattern's just written really, really, really well. I was absolutely very impressed by it, and I wanted to give her a shout out. If you haven't knit any of Celine's patterns before, based on this, I will probably be getting more patterns from her, because like I'm paying for them, because yeah, just amazing writing. The consideration of wanting to build structure that fits you exactly the way that you want it to was just great. Yeah, can't say good enough things about it. I will definitely be knitting another one, which I'll talk about later. So that's the Nurture bralette by Celine. It's hopefully going to be coming out, I think, next month, end of next month. So yeah, definitely watch this space. If you're not already following me on Instagram, I'll be talking more about it there, and I'll definitely be posting about it when it's launched and live. So yeah, it's a great pattern. You should go check it out if you're interested in knitted underwear, because I love knitted underwear. Alright, that's all my finished objects. Now we're going to get into whips. Alright, so whips. I have a fair few whips to talk about today. The first one I'm just going to re-mention quickly. I haven't done loads on it probably since the last time you saw it, but I'm kind of working pretty monogamously on it at the minute because I've got another month to finish it. And this is my test knit for Iris of Iris Makes, and this is her sundial sweater. Looks like that. Oh, it does. Maybe it's a little bit bigger than the last time you saw it. So I'm on body. I'm not going to say Body Island because it's not straight stockinette. It's actually really enjoyable. But it is little needles. I'm a slightly tighter knitter on mohair than I thought. Fun fact. My gauge is very different when I'm holding mohair together with something, and it's much tighter. Sorry, other way around. It's looser than it is without mohair. So what I needed to do, I had to go down a needle size. So it is quite dinky. So this is on 3.5mm needles, which is quite small for a sweater. So it does take a little bit of time for me to get through a whole round. But I love it so much. And even though the weather's getting warmer, I cannot wait to have this thing. Like, look at it. Isn't it beautiful? And I'm going to hold it inside out because it's one of those mind-blowingly genius patterns that's also beautiful on the inside. And I think I might be wearing it reversed a little bit. You know, I'm not normally a fan of reverse stockinette. Just by the by. But I really, really like this. Let me just put it the right way around so you can see. There we go. That's the inside. How beautiful is that? So yeah, love it, absolutely love it. I think the whole thing is stunning. Very excited. So that pattern of those like ribbed troughs goes all the way down the body. The only thing that I have done is I've added an additional one underneath each sleeve, which the pattern doesn't really call for, but I'm going to talk to Iris about it. I'm sure she'll be fine with it. So, love this. This is being knit out of, and again, I've talked about it a lot before, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. It's being knit out of Holstgarn Super Soft in the colourway Larch, which is so beautiful. I talk about it all the time, but I've just caked up another 100 grams, so let me show you. I got it on a cone, and it looks like this. Yeah, so it's just stunning. It's green, but you can see it's got all the colours. So there's green, there's yellow, there's brown, there's blue. Yeah, stunning. Really, really multifaceted colour, which I love. And I'm holding it together with, I've got it in this handy little back up here, Knitting for Olive mohair in the colour Bottle Green. Not olive green, which I think is what I said before. So I wasn't sure that these would work together because this is quite a lot more blue. Obviously there's a lot of yellow in the Larch, and I wasn't sure that they would work together, but I did some swatches, which are here behind me, and I thought it worked really nicely. So actually I'm really thrilled with it. It's come out beautifully and I'm very, very excited to wear it. So that's my sundial sweater. Haven't made loads of progress on it, but that's okay. The next one is a shawl, and I don't think I've ever shown a shawl on here before. It's probably because I've only knit like 2 ever. So I am a continental knitter and therefore not a huge fan of purling. I don't mind it. I don't avoid it at all costs, but I'm not a massive fan of it. So I don't normally do shawls, but I was working on a project in Whistlebear's Cheviot Marsh, which I really, really enjoyed, but as I was halfway through it, realised I basically just wasn't ever going to wear it for various reasons. It just wasn't really the right shape for me and the way that I tend to wear shawls. I'm a triangle shawl fan. I am a triangular, put the point in front of me, wrap the ends around my neck, like very basic, but that's how I wear shawls. I have a few like that and I wear them. They're the only things that I wear as far as shawls. So I ripped out the one that I was working on and I balled up the Cheviot Marsh and was like, oh, I need to just let you sit there for a while and look at me. So I've still got a skein, that's this one here, that hasn't been caked up yet, and I left it up in my yarn gallery so that it could just stare at me for a bit and tell me what it wanted to be. This is where I put things to kind of mull over what they'd like to be. And I had a bunch of ideas. I did a few swatches, and I just still couldn't really find what I wanted it to be. And then Zakami Yarn, who I have talked about a little bit before, they are starting to move much more into the non-superwash kind of realm of things, which I'm really excited about, because they've always done beautiful colourways, but most of their yarn catalogue before was superwash. And as I started kind of moving away from superwash, especially for garment knitting, there wasn't really much that I wanted to purchase from them. But I still follow them. I think their ethos is lovely. I really enjoy watching, and their colour sensibility is just awesome. So they released a new base, and sometimes when they have new stuff in, they'll put them up on their Instagram and say, hey, these aren't quite in the shop yet, but if you'd really like to try one, let us know. So I did, because I just saw this and was like, I am so intrigued by that base, and I'd really love to do something with it. And I wanted to use it kind of like a mohair. And that base is this. Now, I can't remember the name of this base, but it is alpaca, merino and Pima cotton, I think. So it's pretty floofy. I don't know if you can see that. It's quite floofy, but it's not as skinny as merino. So it doesn't have quite as big of a halo as mohair. Doesn't have quite as big a halo as mohair, and it's, oh my gosh, it's so soft. I just want to rub it on my face. You know how when you sometimes get yarn and you're just like, you just want to sit and do this forever. I look like such a weirdo, just. But yes, it's so soft. I caked it up immediately. I left it in the skein for all of 30 seconds when I unpacked it. This is the colourway Hygge, Hygge, and it's beautiful. It's kind of cool toned, neutral. There are some kind of lilac-y shades in there, and there's some warmer beige throughout, and then because it's got cotton, it's got like a pale core, which is quite often the case with cotton yarns. You know, the central core is paler. Sometimes you get that with mohair as well, because it just doesn't take the dye in the same way. And I decided to cast on a shawl with those two yarns, so with the Cheviot Marsh, which is the colour Heartland, which again is stunning. I mean, look at it. There you go. I have to be back here, don't I, for colours to... Yeah, there you go. So this is much cooler than this, but there is enough cool to kind of make them work together. And then this is Cheviot Romney, I think, I might be lying. Full ply. And then this is, as I said, with the floof alpaca Pima cotton. So this is the shawl that I started casting on. It's a bit curly right now. Ta-da! Clearly I'm on a lace kick at the moment. There's some lace in there. So this is the From My Journey shawl by Needle on Needle, or Dolly. I've talked about her before in the candy bar socks that I've made a couple pairs of, and I really like her patterns. I think she's a really underrated designer. I will say her patterns aren't always the clearest. This one in particular, there are a few points where you're like, do I need to cut the yarn, do I not? But I really, really love this shawl. It's a triangular shape, as you can see. You start from one corner and then it becomes asymmetrical. So I'm currently in the symmetrical part. Sorry for the rustling, but let me show you a picture. There you go. So that's what it will look. That's what it will look like eventually. It's a little bit smaller than I expected, I think, but that's okay. It's not going to be too small, and so you cast on from this end, and I'm currently kind of here. but I also haven't blocked it, and I suspect this is going to block out massively because it's garter. So one of the reasons that I chose it is because it's garter stitch primarily. So it's obviously got that lace section in the middle, which is really pretty. There you go. You start off with just stripes, then you've got a lace section, and then we've moved into the slip stitch section. So you're only ever working with one colour, despite having this texture. Really, there we go. It's kind of hard to see when I hold it up super close, but I really love this. I think it's going to be beautiful, and it's so squishy. Smells so good, so squishy. Love it a lot. The only thing I will say about this pattern is if you are someone who likes being able to unravel, and I know Amy Palco talks about this quite a lot. If you're someone who really likes being able to unravel a project if it's not working, the beginning of this pattern, the stripes, you have to cut the yarn each stripe. When you change to the next colour, you can't carry your colour up the side because you're starting on the opposite side. So it's just worth noting that if you are someone who likes to be able to potentially unravel your yarn if it's not working for a project, which as a rule I am also very similar. I don't like having lots of little bits that I need to cut as I'm making a project. That's just because I think it's partly because I'm not a massively experienced knitter, but also because I like having the option to finish something and decide maybe it hasn't worked, unravel it and reuse that yarn for something else. So yeah, that's the only thing I will say that's maybe a little bit of a con about the project, but I'm really, really enjoying it. It's both charted and written, which I find really helpful. I'm not super confident reading charts. I'm not sure if it's an ADHD thing, but I find it easier to just mark where I am in the written instructions. I find myself rereading certain lines from charted, and I know that there are lots of things I could do to make that easier, but I just find written instructions a bit easier for certain things. So it's got both, which is great because I can flip back and forth between the two. So that is the From My Journey shawl, which I'm really, really loving. One more whip, and then I'm going to show you some spinning content, which I don't always do. So my husband now has quite a few pairs of hand knitted socks from me, and he really loves them. When he's at home, he's wearing hand knitted socks, so he doesn't really wear them out. He doesn't wear them in his trainers, because he doesn't really wear any kind of shoes except trainers, and so he doesn't want to wear them inside those, which is totally fine. But once he's in the house, he'll come home, he'll take his socks off and he'll put knitted socks on. So I made him a pair recently out of some scraps that I had, and he really loved them, and he said, these are the best fitting ones you've made, but the cuff is a little bit too tight. And I said, cool, no problem. The next pair that I make you, I'll do them cuff down, because I prefer the finish of cuff down, but I prefer knitting toe up. It's a whole thing. So I said, yeah, no problem. I don't have enough stock yarn to make you a single colour pair. Would you like a stripy pair? And he was like, I don't think I want a scrappy pair. I was like, that's fine. And he's got big feet, so a scrappy pair would be kind of a pain because of the amount of changing colours I'd probably have to do. So I just waited around to see if anyone was coming out with some cool colours, or not to buy the same, because he's got like 3 or 4 grey pairs from Somerset Yarns, because I just always bought loads of their grey because I really liked it. The other thing about him is that he will chuck his socks in with our regular washing, so I have to do superwash for him. He has no interest in waiting around for them to be hand washed, and that's fine, like totally fine. I totally get that. So I was paying a bit of attention to a few different indie dyers, seeing what they might come out with, and Fiberfox came out with a Star Wars collection. Now, we are, aside from being knitters, we are a bit of a dorky house. And when I say a bit, our house is kind of affectionately referred to as Nerdvana by our friends, because we have every kind of console. We've actually just got rid of our Xbox, but very recently. But we have all the consoles, we have PC, we have our living room has figurines and art and things from games. We have a full-sized Mandalorian helmet, which was a wedding present. Like, that's the level of dork we're talking about. Which I'm totally fine with, by the way. It's not like it's not an issue. I contribute to this just as much. We play Dungeons and Dragons, which if you've watched either Heather and Hops or Sarah Kareen Nitzy will know. We play Dungeons and Dragons. We love it. Monica, who's one of our other friends, has just released a new podcast called The Goblin's Pockets with a guy called Ian, who's the DM next door. Which I highly recommend if you're interested in D&D or interested in getting into D&D but you're not really sure where to start. Goblin's Pockets is a fantastic new podcast. They've only got a couple of episodes. Go check it out, it's really good. So we love all things nerd. All things dork, all things nerd, all things geek. We are very much there. So when there was a Star Wars collection of yarn, I sent the link to my husband and said, anything in this that you're interested in? He went, oh, I want all of them. I went, well, you can't have all of them. You can have one. Which would you like? And he chose this colour, which is superwash merino nylon in the Exegol. I'm not as much of a Star Wars head as he is. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but this colour. So again, I'm going to hold it back here so it's a bit more accurate. Yeah. So this is a blue-black variegated yarn. It's beautiful. And I'm just making him a pair of vanilla socks. I have started the second one as well. If you know me at all, I tend to cast on both socks at the same time on DPNs. In this case, I actually cast them on 2 at a time, magic loop, and I don't know why I did that, because I started doing socks like that when I very first started knitting socks. And so the first sock I ever made was like a DK weight house sock, 1 sock at a time, but magic loop. And then I found out about 2 at a time and was like, awesome, I can do magic loop but get a pair done. Problem is now my stockinette stitch is quite a lot faster, and I get really frustrated with how slow it is having to move my cables around. So I got 15 rounds in, and then went, oh, this is really annoying, so I transferred them to DPNs because I'm just much faster on DPNs. So this is where I got to. It's a teeny tiny little thing. So I think it's 10. Yeah, it's 10 rounds of 1x1 rib at the top. German twisted cast on, so it's nice and stretchy. And then yeah, plain stockinette stitch. I'm gonna do. I might try doing a heel flap and gusset for him, because I do short row heels mostly for him, and they do fit, but he's got quite a wide, like from the back of his bottom back of his ankle to the top front of his ankle, which is like the widest part of your foot. He's got quite a wide, quite a long distance. Oh my god, the measurement of that's quite big compared to the rest of his feet. So I think I might try and do a heel flap and gusset and see if that helps give him a bit more room. Or just do a little bit of increasing before I do the heel, and a little bit of decreasing after the heel, just so there's a tiny bit more fabric coming into that central point. So I'll let you know how that goes, but of course I have a pair of socks on the needles at all times. So that is all of my whips. Now, there's some spinning and then 2 other little knitting related things that I'd like to talk about. So spinning wise, I showed you last time this little basket of goodness. Now these are different Rolags from the last time I showed you. I appreciate they look exactly the same. I learned how to make Rolags recently with my tiny little hand carders, and I freaking love them. So I'm doing woolen spun for the first time. This is 100% Gotland, undyed, straight off of a sheep and then washed. And oh my days, it smells so good. Oh, it smells so good. It smells like a sheep, but in a good way. You just want to hug it. So yes, this is 100% Gotland fibre. I have a sweater's quantity of this, so I have 500 grams total. This is 50 or 40 grams worth now within that basket. And because I have an e-spinner, I can show you where I'm at. This is my current progress. So my ply, as you can see, is pretty small. I'm going to do a chain ply on this. So, I mean, it'll do a little ply back here, so you can see what a 2-ply would look like, which is this guy. But I'm actually going to chain ply it, so it'll be a tiny bit thicker than that, because as much as I would love to knit a sweater out of that teeny tiny yarn. I think I need to make it a little bit thicker so I don't lose my mind on like 2.5mm needles or something. Yes, so absolutely adore this. I'm really, really excited about it. And spinning woolen spun from Rollags is just a dream. Really, really enjoying it. I have no idea if I'm doing it right. This is like my fourth spin ever. So yeah, I'm super newbie. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I really, really love it. I'm really enjoying it. So when I want to give my hands a break from knitting, I'm doing a little bit of that. Doing a little bit of that every day, which I'm really enjoying. Final two things that I wanted to talk about, which are knitting related, but not a finished object and not a whip. The first one is 2 yarn acquisitions, which again, like I said, I don't buy yarn very often. So this is new to me yarn, which my husband requested. This is new to me yarn, which was very kindly gifted. And then I have 2 more gifts. I know, but these are gifts. These are gifts from friends as opposed to from my lovely community of supporters. They're still my community of supporters, but they're also real life friends. So this one here, I can't get it now, of course, hang on. Okay. This arrived, now it was my birthday quite a long time ago, but we've had some issues with our Royal Mail delivery stuff recently. I'm not going to get into that, it's very boring. But this arrived on my doorstep like 2 days ago, along with a note saying happy birthday, and I was like, what? It turns out they attempted delivery, and then we never found out that they had attempted delivery of anything, so then it just reappeared at some stage. This is from my bestie, and obviously she knows me very well because it's Nervous Fibre, of course it is. This colour, you got, like, look at it. Oh. I love it so much. So this is the softest thing I think I've ever touched. It's alpaca cashmere silk. Oh, it's so squishy. I love it so much. It's the colourway Drake. I think I'm saying that right. I'll put it on the screen though. It is sock weight, and oh my days, it's so soft. So it's straight into my yarn gallery to stare at me, to tell me what it wants to be, but I think it might become another one of these. Right? That would be a good colour for a little bralette. And it's so soft. It's very much next to skin soft, so I think that would be awesome. So I have a strong feeling that I may immediately cast on another one of these in this colour. So yes, that's a little plan. But I'm not going to do it until I finish my sundial, because the test deadline for that is coming up. It's not super soon, it's like over a month away, but I do need to like kind of get cracking with that sweater now, because as I said, it's a lot of knitting on quite small needles. So I'm focusing on that for the moment, but once that's done, I think I might be casting on another Nurture bralette in that incredible base. So that's acquisition number 1. Acquisition number 2 is the cutest thing ever. So my friend Maria, who I went up to visit recently and stayed with in London, is also a really prolific knitter. She's like me in that she knits a lot of process knits, so she gifts an awful lot of her things away, but she's starting to really find what she loves. I introduced her to Nervous Fibre recently, and she bought a bunch of sock yarn and was like, oh my days, this is so beautiful. So we've been really enjoying kind of connecting through knitting as well as other things, because we didn't meet each other through knitting. And she has been experimenting just on her own, in her own kitchen, no interest in like making it a business or anything, but just for fun, doing a bit of hand dyeing with natural ingredients. So she made a bunch of different skeins recently with different colours. So she's done like an avocado one, a eucalyptus one, a black beans one, and she's just bought like something wild, like a few kilos worth of yarn to play with, to do some more. And the last time I went up to see her, she had this amazing grey 100% Corriedale, I think, or 100% BFL. No, I think it's Corriedale, you know. I think it's 100% Corriedale. So she had this amazing grey, and she was like, yeah, I like it, but I want to make it a bit more interesting, and I've got a few acid dyes, so I'm going to play with them and see if I can make it a bit more interesting. And she dip dyed it, and she made this. Now, we're not going to talk about it too much because, again, we're not going to give too much attention to She Who Shall Not Be Named, but is this not a Ravenclaw colourway, if you've ever seen one? Like, what the heck? So the grey was achieved with black beans, and then the blue was an acid dye that she added on top. I haven't now swatched this yet, but because it's 100% Corriedale, which is the same as the Nervous Fibre base, I'm going to make my bestie a pair of Ravenclaw socks, because she's a Ravenclaw. I'm weirdly a Gryffindor. Fun fact. I was convinced I'd be a Ravenclaw because I'm a dog, you know, but apparently I'm a Gryffindor. Anyway, yes, so I love this, and I was basically gushing over it last time I saw her, and she went, oh, take it. And I was like, no, you need to make something out of this. And she said, I have kilos worth of yarn to play with, please take it and do something lovely with it. And I was like, okay. So I'm very excited about that. So once I finish my husband's socks, this will be the next pair of socks that I cast on. Yeah, so thank you, Maria, I'm very excited about it. Alright, last thing before we get into the chatter segment. It's kind of in the chatter segment, I guess, but I'm going to talk about it here because it is more knitting craft related. So Melody Hoffman from Bee Mandarines, she put a story out the other day talking about various things, and someone had asked her what her knitting needle holder was, and she talked about it and said, I'm not going to promote it here because it's just like a kind of quite plasticky solution. It's not my favourite. I think there must be more sustainable ways to do this. But she showed what it was, and immediately I went, I have one of those in my house somewhere. So I've had this little thing for a long time, and it never occurred to me to use it for knitting needles. But I've been getting a little bit frustrated with my current interchangeable needle storage because I have this thing here, which I've talked about before on a previous episode, so you can go back and have a look at it, which I put all of my DPNs into because I have a set of DPNs from Knit Pro in the UK or Knitter's Pride if you're in the US, and I really love that, and it's very helpful. I mostly only use 2.25s for socks, but occasionally I have need for others, and it's useful to have them in that little set. But I also have a couple of different sets of interchangeables. So I have a Chalgi set, and I also have a Knit Pro Knitter's Pride set, and then I have a couple of randoms. So I have a few Looker tips, which I'm not going to lie are not my favourite, and I have a few Looker cables which are just hideous, and I don't use them because they're like solid. They're horrible, they're so stiff. But Looker and Knit Pro can be used on the same cables. So if you didn't know that, fun fact for you, if you have Knit Pro tips and or cables, they can be interchanged with Looker tips and cables. So I don't know if I have, so this is a Looker DPN. So like the standard driftwood ones. They have a bunch of different colours and things now that have come out. They were super popular a little while back, and they are my go-to wooden DPNs, but I don't use wooden needles very often, which I've talked about before. So yeah, I wanted to have a better solution, somewhere that I could put all of my interchangeable needles at once. And so when I saw Melody talking about this, I was like, I have this, and I can use my label maker as well. So like all the best things. See, dog, told you. So again, I'm not going to link to where I got it because quite honestly, I couldn't tell you. I've had this sitting in a box in its wrapping, completely unused for a long time. I think someone might have even gifted it to me a long time ago or given it to me. Anyway, it's just been sitting in a box in my house. But it's a little like Filofax thing with a popper, and it has, let me just open it up to the middle so you can see, it has like a ring binder down the middle and then a bunch of these plastic zippy pockets. So nothing has fallen out of this, like nothing's going to come out of this bad boy, which I'm very excited about. So what I went and did is I went through and categorized. I worked out how many of these I could fit, if they had stuff in them, how many I could comfortably fit in here, and how many different sizes of needles I had, plus like how I use my needles. So I then just made some labels, and yeah. So anything that's got a cable on it, that's because it's a fixed cable. And then at the back, whoop, I have my Chalgi cables, and I have my Knit Pro or Looker cables. And then I have a couple of spare pockets for things. But for example, I have 8 to 10 mil all in one envelope, because I basically never use needles that big. I might even take these out at some point and not have them in all the time because they're quite bulky. I don't really knit on anything above a 5 mil, and even 5 mil is getting a bit chunky for me. That may change, but I find it a little bit hard on my hands, so I tend to work with things between 2 and 4 mil. So yeah, really love this thing, and this now has all of my interchangeable needles in it, and I can just throw it in a bag or take it anywhere with me, and it's not super big and bulky. Yeah, really love it. I know it's not the best solution. I know that you know, as far as plastic and stuff, it's not necessarily the best, but I did think about how it would be possible to make something like this without using a ton of plastic. And actually it is tricky, because one of the reasons it works so well is that these are transparent envelopes, and obviously that gets quite hard to do. Like if you wanted to use a mesh solution, for example, like a mesh bag fabric, like this kind of thing, your needles, the smaller needles would just poke straight through it, or sharper needles would just poke straight through it and things. So yeah, for now it's a really good solution for me. I had this anyway, and I'm really glad I found a use for it, because it was just sitting in my house. But like I said, couldn't possibly link to it, no idea where it's from. I'm sure you can get them from all the tedious, big, horrible companies if you would like to. But I just wanted to mention, if you have anything like this kicking around in your house, you may actually be able to find a good use for it. So, all right, let's get into the chatter segment. If you're not here for the chatter and you're done checking out all the projects and stuff, it was lovely to see you. Thank you so much for sticking around. And if you want to do the chatter segment, settle in, get a drink, because we're going to get into it today. Right, I'm going to knit on this sock while I'm talking to you, because then I don't have to look at it. I'm not going to lie, I forgot how long it takes to film these episodes, but that's fine. I've got nothing to do today. It's Sunday. I'm just chilling out before it's too hot to take the dogs outside right now, so we've just got a relaxed day, no commitments, which is really nice and quite rare. I'm going to have a sip of my coffee, which is definitely cold. Alright, so I wanted to have a little bit of a chat about knitting community and like holding people to account, and researching the people that you follow and who you choose to be influenced by and that kind of thing. Because I've noticed recently there's a lot of judgment and assumption that gets thrown around, and how we choose to deal with those things, and it's really it's really interesting to me. Again, if you've been here for a while, you'll know that none of my channel or anything I talk about is ever designed to judge people or shame them for the way that they choose to knit, for the way that they choose to interact with things. It's all kind of a curiosity place. But I also think that sometimes, especially in the world of social media, we can be like hypersensitive to things that make us feel bad about ourselves, or like engaging in topics that are uncomfortable. So recently, two things that have been happening. Obviously, one of them is the catastrophic attack on reproductive rights that's happening in the US right now. And the other one is a particular group of knitters who have built a brand off harming minoritized communities. So I'm going to talk about the first one. Like, we're getting into it, guys. We're in like deep territory today. But I wanted to talk about it because there is a bit of a thing on the internet when you find somebody who you relate to, or who inspires you in some way, or, you know, just puts things out and you're like, I get this. And then you find out that they are a less than perfect person. And you get really angry at them and you're like, how dare you not be squeaky clean, perfect individual? And we forget that nobody is a perfect person, because there's no such thing, right? Because we're all different, we all have different beliefs, and we all have different, we all have faith in something different. Whether you're religious or not has nothing to do with it, but we all have faith in some stuff. You know, it might be in believing that people are fundamentally good until told otherwise. It might be that you have belief and faith in the law and government and, you know, whatever it is. And it's not about right or wrong, it's just understanding that everybody has a set of beliefs that they follow. And one of the things I found super fascinating about the discussion around reproductive rights is because the people who are against abortion, and I'm going to use the word abortion because I think it's really important to be very clear about what we're talking about here. The people who are against abortion constantly talk about, if I did this, if I did that, I would never do this. And I think the point that gets missed an awful lot of the time is it's not about an individual. It's about people having the right to choose what is safe and healthy and maintainable and feasible for them in their particular situation in life right now. We know that people need abortions. It's just a fact. There are a whole bunch of situations in which people very legitimately need to be able to access safe, hygienic, and affordable abortions. And I'm not going to get into the hypotheticals here, but we just know that that's true. And we also know, looking at data and fact, that when we take away that access, people die. Like, again, facts here. It's not about I believe this or I believe that. And I'm not going to talk about whether I would choose to have an abortion if I was in that situation or not, because, quite frankly, that's completely irrelevant to this argument. But we know that when we take away specific rights, people die, and that the people who are dying and who are at greater risk are minoritized communities. We know that, right? Because, without putting it too specifically, we know that rich, privileged people, mostly white people, but again, not all white people, because not all white people are rich, but mostly privileged white folks, if they need to get one, they'll be able to get one because they have money. As soon as you take away the right to have something, it affects the people who don't have the financial and societal privilege to do it anyway. Right? So that's, for me, where it kind of comes down. And what I thought was really interesting was the number of people online, and, you know, even within the knitting community, who immediately decided, well, I'm not going to engage with you. And again, I'm not saying that that's wrong, because actually what I think is really important is understanding that every person that you follow online is a real human being, right? They have a set of beliefs, you have a set of beliefs. It is up to you to decide where that line is, right? So there's a cartoonist who I was following for a while, and he said some very problematic things around reproductive rights back in about 2017, and that was before I discovered him. So, you know, I wasn't aware of it. I sent one of his comic strips to a friend of mine, and she said, yeah, he is really super talented. It's such a shame that he's done this. And I was like, oh no, that's really frustrating. He's so creative, and so, like, he does very cool things that I really like engage with, and that I really relate to. And I went and did a bit of research and was like, yeah, oh, that's annoying. And I had to make a decision then of whether I wanted to choose to keep following and sharing this person and giving them a platform. And when I asked myself that question, I was like, fundamentally, I can't keep supporting them. And again, that's a choice that you can't make for anybody else, right? You have to decide where that line is. And there are some knitters in the knitting community. There are some big designers in the knitting community. There are whole groups, which we'll get into in a minute, who have been called in initially very constructively about things that they've done, and they have point blank refused to acknowledge why they're a problem, or to learn, or to move forward, or to grow. Because it's so much easier to stay in their bubble and to go, no, I don't want to deal with that. I'm going to stay with this little group of people who are going to keep telling me how wonderful I am while harming others. And that's kind of where, that is also always what it comes down to, right? Is how okay are you with hurting other people? And so the reason I wanted to talk about this today is that there is a publication, and I'm not going to name it because I don't want to give them any kind of platform. And I also don't want for the people who have been targeted to be more targeted. But there is a publication that has built a reputation and at this point is building a brand off the back of intentionally calling out and harming minoritized communities. Now, I have feelings about the word minoritized, but when we're talking about power dynamics, we're talking about people who have less access to opportunities in general terms. So that could be people of color, that could be women, that could be LGBTQIA plus people, it could be people from less economic privilege, right? We're talking about all sorts of different things. It could be immigrant families. Basically, we're talking about people who statistically and factually have less access to opportunity in society. And again, whether you agree on that is kind of irrelevant. If you look at the facts, that's just true. So I was obviously completely disgusted, but also there is a desire in the knitting community to go, we don't talk about politics, we don't talk about difficult things, it's just knitting here. Like we're just knitting, right? Like knitting is a completely isolated thing, and when you do it, that's all you're doing. Well, the problem is nothing that you ever do is in isolation. When you knit, the choices that you make have an impact. So when you choose to support somebody who has very publicly chosen to harm a community of people, then you are by definition supporting that belief, right? So you have to make a decision as to what are the beliefs that I will not support with my wallet, with my social media influence. And everyone has social media influence, no matter how small it may be. If you choose to share something by somebody, then you are supporting them and their beliefs, right? So again, none of this is about like, oh, they're all terrible, they're 100% terrible people. Well, of course they're not, because nobody is 100% terrible. Nobody is all good or all bad. So you get to choose how much of somebody's belief system you align with, and if you align with it enough to then start sharing it with the rest of the world. And when these really problematic things started coming up, the people who were being targeted by this particular publication had asked, please don't tag us in it. We know we don't really want to be told about it the whole time. Like, we don't know what to do about it. Please stop like sharing it. Just making pretty things isn't enough, right? The world of craft and knitting is actually much more connected to a whole bunch of things than we probably ever realize. And there are a lot of people who are building big brands and quite carefully divorcing the person that they are from them because they know they'll make more sales. And to me, that's a problem, right? Like, authenticity in this space is hard to do on the internet. It's really hard to show people what you're really like, and that's fine. You're allowed to keep stuff to yourself. You don't have to share the entirety of you on the internet, but if you're going to prop up somebody and you're going to, hold them up and say, I'm sharing this thing, I'm giving them more of a platform, then it's worth knowing, what they believe, how they feel about things, and whether you can get on board with that. Because I think there is, in the world of craft, and it's not just knitting, but in the crafting space, there is a really strong feeling that we don't talk about difficult things here because it's just knitting and it's just nice, and why can't we all just be nice to each other? And I agree, like, there's no reason to be rude, there's no reason to shame people, there's no reason to be cruel, but it goes in both directions. So if somebody else is doing those things and you're like, well, I'm just supporting them because they make pretty stuff, ask yourself why it's okay to choose to turn a blind eye to things that you know are a problem. If you agree with them, that's a whole different thing, right? But a lot of the time I think we follow people not knowing what else they're doing or what else they support. There have been some things coming out recently about very high profile knitting influencers who have been bullying smaller makers, and as soon as they try and speak out, because they're so big and they have such a big following, they get like lynched online, right? That is not okay. Pay attention to the people that you follow online. Think about what you want to what you want to be known for, what you want to represent as a person. And everyone is different, and that's okay, because we should be different. We should be celebrating the things that make us different. It's already such a minefield to be online, from a mental health standpoint, from a, as someone who's on an ADHD diagnosis journey. The internet is designed to get us addicted to dopamine, and if you are deficient in dopamine, it's like extra hard. So you have to be really vigilant about who you follow and what you choose to absorb and what you choose to put in your brain and put in front of you. So if you can help lift people up, please do it. If you can help to support people who aren't automatically given the opportunities anyway, please do it. If you're somebody who really believes that the knitting community and the knitting space is too mono in all the senses of that word, too monocultural, too based on binary cisgendered people and privileged rich people, then do something about it. Make a point for a month of only sharing people who have less than X amount of followers, or only sharing people who identify from a background completely different to yours. Because how amazing would the internet be if we all made an effort to follow more people who don't look or sound or experience life like we do? Like, how much more would you learn instead of being told stuff that you already believe back at you constantly? And I think that if we could all do like 5% more of that, then it's like the amount of weird, repressed hate being projected onto everybody would be so different, because there'd be no need. And whenever somebody is causing harm, call them in. And I say call them in rather than calling them out, right? Because it's not about saying you're a terrible person. It's asking, why are you doing that? With genuine curiosity, like, why are you doing this? Because we don't know. And it's easy to make assumptions, but we don't know. So the chatter today really is all about asking more questions online, listening and asking more questions. And if you can make an effort to follow some people who don't look like you, who don't sound like you, then do it. You'll learn so much. Do it and just pay attention. Just watch and listen to what they have to say. So that's my little PSA for today. For those of you who don't know, I am a mixed race, white presenting person, and therefore that particular element is quite important to me. I'm obviously also female. I'm also queer. So like, there's a whole bunch of important things for me in that conversation. But I'm also very deeply aware that I'm white presenting, and therefore I have already got a tremendous amount of privilege in the way that I walk through the world. And I'm not perfect, and I mess up, and I'll get things wrong, and I will continue to get things wrong. But I hope that if we can all just like try and take a couple steps as often as we can to being a tiny bit uncomfortable, getting okay with that, getting okay with someone saying, hey, this caused harm or this wasn't okay, then yeah, we would be able to move forward and change things. And yeah, I hope that we can, because I really think that knitting and crafting in general has the power to be such a force for good and a force for positive change in a way that really doesn't affect those of us who already have privilege and power. Like, it doesn't affect us, but it could make such a huge difference to other people. So if there's something that's really bothering you that you're getting like really hot under the collar about, and then when you look at it, if that thing were to happen, it literally wouldn't affect your life, ask yourself why it bothers you so much. Like, if the law was passed tomorrow saying that abortion is now free and legal for anyone who needs it, how does that affect your life and the way that you live? Does it really make any difference to you? So yeah, ask more questions, listen more, try and follow people who don't look or sound or think like you, and lift each other up. It was a very deep end to the episode. I appreciate I do that. So I'm sorry for those of you who are new. This was an especially deep episode. So yeah, thank you very much for sitting and listening and chatting with me. And I'll see you next time. Until we meet again, move slow and make things.